Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Swing County Swing State Virtual Forum. For the next hour, we're going to give you a chance to sit in on a conversation among 4 voters. They are all from a vital swing region in the single most pivotal state in this presidential election. They're from the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania. We're going to go beyond the labels and the nastiness as these 4 Pennsylvanians discuss how they're thinking through who they want to lead their country for the next 4 years. I'm Chris Citulo, director of the PA Project for Civic Engagement. For 25 years, our organization has been helping people hold productive conversations on challenging issues, leading hopefully to understanding and solutions. I'm also a journalist with deep roots in the Valley. Before stints with the Philadelphia Inquirer and WHYY Public Media, I was an editor at the Eastern Express, or the Express as natives tend to call it. And my daughter Sarah now reports for Lehigh Valley Live and is one of the lead writers on the site's Swing County Swing State project. This ambitious project has done dozens of multimedia stories profiling voters in Northampton County and exploring the county's long history as a political bellwether, a place to study if you want strong clues as to who will sit next in the Oval Office. This great work, which you can find online at lehighvalleylive.com/Swing County, has been supported by a grant from the John Farmer Memorial Journalism Fund. The fund, established in memory of the legendary late Star-Ledger columnist, seeks to foster work that operates at the nexus of local and national news. Okay, now let's get started. We gathered 4 people who were interviewed as part of the project. They're going to join us to talk about what they've been doing, thinking, and feeling during this crazy, pandemic-haunted election year. Let's meet them. We have Abraham Bolton, Jenna Broadhead, Elizabeth Choi, and Ronald Reichard. Now, unfortunately, we confronted a moment ago the dreaded technical glitch as Abraham's Zoom camera froze. So he's joining us right now by phone. But I'd like to bring them in now and ask each of them to introduce themselves, starting with Jenna. If you could tell us where you're from, what you do, and if you could tell us a story about your name, first, last, middle, nickname, whatever, but something about what your name means to you. Jenna?
My name's Jenna Broadhead. I was born in Los Angeles, California, and moved to the Lehigh Valley in 1990. I am a teacher in the Easton Area School District, proud Red Rover. And interesting story about my name, which is very poignant. I'm doing research with my students about their family history. In my family, you are named after someone, but you aren't named after the name, you're named after the initial. So the J for Jenna comes after my great-grandfather, which is a very nice tie, as he traveled through Ellis Island to come to America. But unfortunately, when I started dating my husband in high school, he was Broadhead, and I have become Broadhead. And when we're with our friends who know us both and they say Broadhead, we're not sure which one they're talking to.
Okay, thanks, Jenna. Elizabeth Choi.
Hi, I'm Liz Choi, also Liz Rose Choi. Rose is my middle name. I got my middle name from a great aunt, and I love the name Rose, so I'm working toward becoming more of Rose Choi over the years to come. Choi, I got my last name from my husband. He's Korean. And my business is GiveMe5.com. I'm in sales. We do custom print, promotions, and apparel. In 2020, though, it's been almost exclusively PPE.
Mm-hmm. And where do you live, Liz?
I live in Bethlehem. I was born and raised in Allentown and moved away for 13 years and love to travel. I said I would never move back, but I did. And here I am in Bethlehem for 13 years again.
Thanks. And Ron, let us know about yourself.
Well, I'm a landlord. I have property in Northampton County. My name is Ron. It was my dad's name and it was handed down. I too am a carpenter. That's what my dad did. That's about all I can tell you.
Mm-hmm. Where do you live, Ron?
I live in Wescosville, actually, just outside of Allentown.
Okay, great, thanks. And now joining us by phone, and he's been very persistent in making sure he could be part of this event, and we thank him for that, Abraham Bolton. Abraham, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I was named after Abraham in the Bible by my father.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was a very religious man, and he's not with us today. And I live in Allentown. I came from New Orleans. I came to Allentown about 5 years ago from New York City. And I really like Allentown. I worked at Yankee Stadium for 25 years. You know, I'm retired. Moved to Allentown from the Bronx, and everything is good.
Good. What did you do at Yankee Stadium, Abraham?
I cleaned up after the baseball games.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
so you weren't able to give George Steinbrenner advice then?
Huh?
You weren't able to give George Steinbrenner any advice about free agents then, huh?
No, I never seen George Steinbrenner except on TV.
Okay. So thanks very much for joining us, and we want to commend all four of our panelists on taking a risk. You know, it's not the easiest thing in the world in this election year and in the context of polarization in this country to risk talking about politics in public. Those of you who are following online, you have the ability to make comments in chat, but we're going to really ask you to remember that these folks are your neighbors and fellow citizens, and treat them with respect. Don't say anything in the chat that you wouldn't say if you were sitting in their living room. And we have a set of ground rules for this conversation that we've already discussed, and everybody's agreed to them. I just want to throw them up on the screen so everybody can see them. And note that the first and last ground rules are the same. Listen, it's as important as talking. At our organization, we try to get people to understand that listening is not something that comes automatically to human beings. If it did, the world would be a much better place. We're not really great at listening. It's a learned skill. You have to work at it and you have to practice it. And we're going to try to do that tonight. The other ground rule I want to just underline quickly is number 3. Some people think civic dialogue is about papering over all differences or just being polite for the sake of not making anyone uncomfortable. That's not what we mean by civic dialogue. What we mean is that you can bring your passion, your values, your experiences to the table, but you express them and react to other people in a way that makes it possible to stay in relationship and to keep talking. Disagreement is great. We don't want to panic or run from it, but we also don't want to just try to win it. This is not a debate. This is a dialogue, a conversation. And we hope everyone will leave tonight's conversation with a little bit better sense of what the other side thinks and why they think it, and what values are driving their decisions in this very, very important election. Okay, so that's enough preamble. Let's go to our first question of the evening. What would you say the coronavirus pandemic has taught you about yourself, other people, the Lehigh Valley community, or this country? And you can talk about any one of those that you care to. Let me read it one more time while you ponder it a bit. What would you say the coronavirus pandemic has taught you about yourself, other people, the Lehigh Valley community, and this country? Okay, if we could go to gallery view so we could see all our panelists together, great. Who wants to go first?
I can go for Abraham.
Okay, Abraham, go ahead.
Seems like the COVID-19 caused a lot of people turning into hypochondriacs. They believe the least thing makes them sick, you know, and they just turning into the disease become a paranoia, like it's everywhere. But for me, I'm happy to wear a mask. If the store won't wear a mask, and when I ride my bicycle, I don't really wear no mask. I don't know. It's a strange thing, you know.
Yeah, Abraham, if I could ask you a question, you said you moved fairly recently from the Bronx, and of course, New York City was one of the places that got hit first and very hard. Do you still have friends or family back in New York City who you got a chance to talk to about their experience last spring?
Well, most of my family is in the Bronx, and some of them in Brooklyn. And they seem to be going along like, ain't none of them sick or nothing. So, I guess they don't know nobody who's sick. So they never say nothing like that to me.
Okay, good.
So I guess they're okay.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that they're all fine. Jenna, did you want to jump in?
Yeah. So I knew I was resilient. I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2013. So I do live my life a little bit differently than most people. I do live with a level of caution on a normal day. So, this just reminded me that I am resilient and I can take precautions not only to keep myself and my family safe, but also the community. I guess what it's taught me is there was a really great feeling in the beginning of this pandemic that there was that sense of community, that we were doing things to help keep not only ourselves but each other safe. In more recent days, obviously, we've experienced some COVID fatigue, and that has, fallen to a different level. But in the beginning, there was that sense of community camaraderie that I don't know that I felt in a really long time, and that felt really, as someone who lives in a world where the disease is everywhere for me, it was kind of nice to know that we were taking action to support each other.
Is there anything distressing that you've learned about your community or other people during this period?
Yeah, I'm concerned at the level of skepticism of science.
Mhm.
Science saved my life. So for me, it's a pretty critical component of my world. And the level of skepticism for science has been concerning to me because, it's a tried and true process. It's not only, it's not something we jump to conclusions on. There's a process in place for a reason.
Mhm. Vaughn, did you want to jump in?
Well, I can tell you a couple of things. I share some people's opinions that I was truly impressed with the way everybody came together, especially in the beginning when we did that 4 weeks to slow the spread.
Mhm.
As a landlord, I have some properties in Center City, Allentown, and some in Northampton County. One of the things that I'm finding is that many of my tenants are working hard and they're really trying to do the best that they can. The vast majority are. Now, there's a couple who are just taking advantage of it, and that's a little frustrating, but I think that kind of thing, that's human nature. If you put a bunch of people, you're going to get the majority are going to try to do the right thing, and you get a couple who just don't.
Mhm.
With the with the restrictions, I have no problem with wearing a mask, reducing social activities, going to movies and out to dinner and stuff like that. I'm fine with that stuff. And I think we just gotta kind of tough it out and get through it.
Mhm. As an independent businessman, how did you think the stimulus passed last spring worked, and would you like to see them pass some version of new stimulus?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, one of the things that had been discussed early on, Mitch McConnell, I saw him in an interview, he said it. His comment was, what about landlords? At this point, as a landlord, there has been no stimulus for us. There has been absolutely no help for us as landlords. In fact, I went on a website that suggested I refinance a property to get money to cover it while people aren't paying their rent. So it creates a whole plethora of issues. I I I don't know. So far, I've managed. My income and expenses are way off compared to other years, and it's a struggle every day. I work hard to keep my properties in good shape. I have very happy tenants, and I work hard at that. It's very disappointing, and it gets quite frustrating when you have examples given. I have tenants who go to work every day and just aren't paying their rent because of the moratorium on eviction and stuff like that. And that's what I call taking advantage of the system. that's unfortunate. The majority of my tenants do not do that. Most of them are on the level and they're playing straight. So I'm disappointed. As far as the government support, I felt if they were going to do something, they could have done something. Whether, I don't know. I don't know how they would go about it or how the government would go about it, but certainly we have mortgage payments. As a matter of fact, right now, today, I mailed my third payment of an awful lot of money for school tax.
Mhm.
And when I see those payments going out, and I'm looking at two of the properties, and I know that the tenants are working and they're just not paying their rent, it's a little frustrating and somewhat unnerving. But
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ron.
you're welcome.
Wanted to get Liz, and Liz, we were talking a little bit before we came on live about you're part of that novel but huge and challenged class of people who are working full-time from home and also have kids, so you're trying to help with schooling. So what's the experience been like for you?
Yeah, I've learned where my point of exhaustion is through this. It's such an exhausting time trying to navigate this and figure it out, day by day, encounter by encounter, store by store, like, what's the right move to make? There's not really a cohesive, unified effort in this. So I find that exhausting. I am working from home and I am doing remote learning with my second grader and my fourth grader. So I've learned that I'm resilient in being able to do that. And also that before the pandemic, life was just very, free. You could go places, you could do things, there was so many more things in a day, so many more places to go and activities with the, first and a third grader at the time. There was a lot going on. There were summer camps and all kinds of stuff. And now that it's so dialed down to, what the basic day looks like, just getting through a basic day, I realize also how important a rhythm is to me, like a rhythm of like, where am I getting my food? That came up right away in March, when some of the larger factories were closing down and having COVID.
I think we just lost Liz. Okay. Jenna, we were talking also before. You teach in Easton, and you were running down the bewildering variety of ways that teaching is happening in Easton right now. How is that evolving, and how well is it working in your view?
For me, it's working really well. I'm not, for me, being at home is the safest place for me to be able to provide education for my personal situation. I will tell you it works because I have some of the most phenomenal kids in the entire world. I learn something from them every day. I will be very honest, they have taught me a tremendous amount about technology, and they teach me all the tricks that I need to know to make things look lighter or darker or louder or softer. And it's a day-to-day challenge. You never know kind of what you're going to get, and you have to go in with a real flexible attitude, knowing that, I'm very proud of our students. They're showing up. And I'm even more proud of their parents for helping them. And this is by no stretch of the imagination anything that's easy for any of the students, regardless of how they're attending school, but they're showing up. And if they haven't always showed up, they've begun showing up. If they haven't showed up yet, they will show up. So I have to wake up every morning, give myself a little pep talk in the mirror, and remind myself that we're human, we're learning this together, and there's a great deal of trial and error. And again, I'm just fortunate to have amazing students that I get to work with.
Right. Thanks very much. And we're working to get Liz back in. Sorry she got interrupted by the dreaded technical glitch mid-sentence. Kristen, I wonder if we could have the next question up on the screen so we can move to a new topic. zeroing in a little bit more closely on the election, what's one issue that affects you, your family, or your home community that you wish would have been discussed much more during this election? The pandemic and a couple of other issues have really eaten up a lot of space in this election. And once you tell us what the issue is, we'd like to hear what you'd like to see happen in the next 4 years on that issue. So again, what's one issue that affects you, your family, or your community that you wish would have been discussed much more during this election? Ron? Abraham, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that, I am a Black American, because a lot of people say on the phone, they ask me on the phone when I talk to my Black or white. I'm a Black American, and the issue that I really went with was immigration. I think Trump building the wall was a great thing, even though, I'm married to a wife is from Barbados and I love her very much, so even though I'm against, against immigration, I don't know, I guess, I'm married to somebody from another country and I love her, so. But anyway, that's my biggest issue was immigration because they were taking a lot of jobs away from Black Americans.
Okay.
It's rough because when they came, it was the Black community that was hurt the most. We the one who lost the jobs. And we don't speak Spanish. Most Black Americans don't speak Spanish. We speak English. And and when you lose a country, the first thing to go, and when the country is invaded, the first thing to go is the language. So here he is, and you got to speak Spanish with us, and you can't get a job unless you're bilingual, and this and that and that and this, and it really hurt. It really hurt Black America. So when Trump came in and said he would put up that wall, that really comforted me. That's why I voted for him.
Do you feel like he's delivered on their promise and you've seen an improvement for job opportunities for Blacks in America under President Trump?
Yes, definitely. There's been a change. Like in Allentown, most of the illegals are gone. They was here months ago. I mean, they was here before Trump came. Even the guy in the grocery store told me that his wife don't need to speak English because they done took over. Mm-hmm. He said, "Look around, we done took over." And then when Trump came into office, couldn't say that no more. They took over. Now it's back. We speaking more English. Thank you.
So, Abraham, I have to ask you a question. Since you mentioned your wife's from Barbados, I just have to ask, what does the conversation go like when you offer your opinions on immigration? What does she say back to you?
My wife, she agrees with me.
Oh, she does. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Jenna, your thoughts on an issue that you really think just hasn't gotten enough attention?
So for me, the one issue that hasn't got enough attention is education. Fortunately, I am a proud PSCA member and Pennsylvania State Education Association and NEA member. And I was fortunate enough to hear many of the Democratic candidates speak to their positions on education prior to the primary election. NEA and PSCA are both bipartisan organizations, and all parties are involved to participate. So I was able to hear a lot of their positions on education prior to the whittling down process through the primary election. And a lot of the Democratic candidates had a lot of really poignant information to share. Unfortunately, the last 4 years with the direction of Betsy DeVos in the Department of Education have been catastrophic for public education. And this pandemic has really highlighted some of our areas of weakness. Right now, schools are doing what they need to do to provide education to our students in the safest manner possible. That comes at a cost. And right now, districts are in a position where they are providing PPE, whether that be through cleanings or just student distancing and changing in busing routes, that is going to come at a cost. And districts, it's not going to be sustainable for districts. So we definitely need to be talking more about the implications on our school buildings, on our students. This is going to have a lasting effect on our children. They are also listening. So they're hearing the conversation, they're hearing the not so civil discourse, and it is having an impact on them. So that affects me on a daily basis, whether it be at home or at school. Um, we are, education is in a situation where the difference between public schooling and private and cyber schooling is going to become well more apparent when the price tags come true, when we kind of sit back and to look at really what the cost of this pandemic has meant for public schools.
Jenna, can I push on something?
Yeah.
I understand that Secretary DeVos is a controversial figure, but what would you say to someone that says, education in terms of funding, in terms of where the dollars come from and where the control is primarily a state and local matter, and the federal role, it's easy to sort of, complain about the secretary and some of the things she does, but it really hasn't had that much impact because the feds don't have that big an impact.
It does tie the hands of our states. Fortunately, in the state of Pennsylvania with Governor Wolf, we do have a champion for public education. So he has advocated through his administration to keep things at a level playing field for public education. The problem lies where we're dealing with a whole lot of cyber programs right now, and Betsy DeVos is a very big fan of privatization of education, and it shows in just the schools she's visited. I can't tell you the last time. I can give you an example of Betsy DeVos visiting a public school, and that is going to cause a problem. Again, luckily in the state of Pennsylvania, we do have a champion for public education in Governor Tom Wolf. So we are seem to be in a much better situation in Pennsylvania because of that.
Okay. And I'd like to mention we have a partial celebration going. I think we have Liz Choi back on audio. We haven't gotten the video back. Is that right, Liz?
That's right. I don't know what's going on. My video always works, and right now it's not working. So I've tried everything to try to make it work. I would say, to add on to, I was listening to Jenna, and we have, state control over education, and I would love to hear more talk at the federal level, maybe some engaging questions to try to get states to consider and understand the implications of what might be happening with budgeting over the next several years to come, because this pandemic isn't going to go away on a financial level. Even, if there's a vaccine soon or when we get back to school, there's going to be an economic impact, and we need to give thought to that, and make some plans. And if we could even collaborate as states and play off of each other and have a higher level of conversation that way, I think that would be really helpful.
Those are great points, Liz. And it has been ironic in some senses. Education rose up, maybe not in the way, Jenna, that we would have expected or wanted, but just that whole notion of, for the parents' sake, so that they can go back to work, we have to get the kids back to school. So it has become a federal topic in that sense. Ron, you've been very patient. As an independent businessman, what issue would you love to hear a little bit more about?
Well, let me just comment on the two previous parts of the conversation. With Abraham, I get what he's saying about immigration. There's some value in that. However, I think we should also support legal immigration, not illegal. If you're going to come here, do it the legal way. My wife's from the Philippines. She came in legally. She's a citizen. This country is built on immigrants. Now, as far as some of the education things, there's no question in my mind. There's plenty of room for improvement in education, both pre and post-pandemic. There's a lot of things I notice at 61 years old with two young children, age 7 and 9. I do a lot of homework with my girls and a lot of stuff. And the advanced techniques that they're using, the mathematics that my goodness, my 9-year-old can do all kinds of stuff, fractions and everything. She's very, very good. And this is all from our modern teaching techniques. And Jenna, you should be proud of that. And that's good techniques and a good way to go about it. I don't know where I stand with the public versus private school. I think school choice is a good thing for those who want to take advantage of it, but I think overall improvement of education has got to be an important issue on the local, the state, and the federal level. That's something we all need to concern ourselves with.
Great, thanks, Ron. If we could move to the next question, and this one, we framed this question up a while ago, but it became newly relevant in the last couple of days. So as some of you may know and may have been following, we had a police killing of an African-American man in West Philadelphia, a few blocks away from where I am right now. And obviously there's been some real pain and protest, as well as some unfortunate rioting in the last couple of days. So it just brings this question to the fore again. The Black Lives Matter movement says the US is infected with systemic racism. Think of that as modes of oppression that are deeply embedded in our laws, in our government, in our economic system, in our social customs. I'd like to know whether you agree or disagree with that point of view from Black Lives Matter. And either way, can you cite an example from your personal experience or observation that helped you come to your viewpoint or that supports your viewpoint? Jenna, I'd like to start with you and then go to Abraham next.
I had a funny feeling you were going to say that to me, Chris.
And Abraham.
I do believe that the United States is built on a system of systemic racism. I would be very negligent if I didn't acknowledge that as an educator. I work in a system that was founded and built on systemic racism, in the sense that in the beginning of education, we were educating white males. And that is just the way it was. And we were educating white males who came from families with money or land, in that sense. So I need to acknowledge that. And as a white woman living in America right now, knowing that I have certain abilities to use my voice in ways and not have to think about my race every single day. And that's a privilege. I do recognize that. The education system is built on that systemic racism. You know, you look back to Brown versus the Board of Education and Ruby Bridges attending school for the first time. You go back to the whites only signs in schools, at water fountains, where all students were attending. And those things were embedded so deep in our culture. You look at opportunities that are afforded to students who come from a certain segregated group. You look at opportunities that aren't afforded to our children of color, just based upon, you know, what was talking about, like, just because of your last name or what you are perceived to identify with. It's a problem that really is so rooted deep in our structure of how we operate on a daily basis, that we do need to acknowledge it. We need to call it what it is, and it is racism. And we need to acknowledge all of our roles in that and how we progress forward from here, because we're talking about it. We are aware of it. We need to be better.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. Abraham, I'd love to hear your point of view on this next.
Yeah, well, me being 62 years old, a Black American, you know, there's no senior citizen building in Allentown, Pennsylvania, that's going to let me in. I went to some senior citizen buildings to check out if they have it, fill out applications, and ask the people that lived there. Say, no, ain't no Black men live here. I went to about 5 or 6. No Black men, and no Black Americans, maybe Black Spanish people, you know, live in no senior citizen building in Allentown, Pennsylvania. You know, I tried to get in one, and when you try to get into one, they're going to tell you, you know, forget about it. You know, we ain't getting you in. They told me, you know, go to the shelter. You know, we ain't trying to get you into no senior citizen building. Yeah, you're 62. Yeah, you get disability. But you know what? you know, I don't know. Racism is not only just racism, it's racism, but also tribalism. Okay? People come from certain tribes, you know, and when a tribe gets together with a new family, different from the family they grew up with, kind of, they with the same. Well, anyway, it's just they should have quotas. They should bring back quotas. Saying you should and like Ice Cube should say, Black Americans should be a protected race. Understand? There should be quotas. There should be at least 25% of Black people working in most of the industries in the United States. And you know what? I used to think that the reason we got to the moon, I say white people really help us get to the moon. But if we had some Black people in there, maybe we would have got to Mars. Well, anyway.
No, there was the movie that there were a lot of African American mathematicians who did help with the moonshot. Abraham, I want to hear your thinking on one other thing. You know, you've made it clear that you're a fan of President Trump, but Black Lives Matter movement is extremely unhappy with how we responded to incidents like the death of George Floyd, the death of Breonna Taylor, and the death that happened in Philadelphia just this week. How do you think your way through that? You support President Trump, but there's an awful lot of your fellow African Americans who are very unhappy with him on that point.
Well, far as homicides go with police officers, you know, Trump didn't shoot nobody. It was that cop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was the cop and the guy. They knew each other. They fought. The cop killed the guy. Trump didn't have nothing to do with that. How did Trump have something to do with that? I don't think. You know, Trump. Nobody want to see nobody get killed the way that man was killed. Nobody want to see Nobody want to see somebody get killed the way George Floyd got killed. But you got to put the blame where it lies, on the individual that committed that homicide. You know, it should stop right there.
Okay, thank you, Abraham. Liz, I wanted to go to you and get your feelings.
Yeah, thanks. So I believe this country was founded on oppressing people of different ethnicities. So we still have a way to go to get to equality and appreciating diversity. Black Lives Matter is so important right now. Some people say it's not important because all lives matter. So all lives do matter. The thing is, though, we hit on something here. There's a group of people who started this movement of Black Lives Matters, and it needs to be acknowledged and it needs to be dealt with because it's something that we have in motion now as a number of communities with violence, rage that is continually incited. There's, police violence. Is it only against people, African Americans? No, but there's story after story that's coming to the surface of violence against African Americans when it could have maybe been, I wasn't there, but there was a knife, it could have been a taser, it didn't have to be a number of bullets. That wasn't necessary. And why is the conversation so defensive where police brutality is somehow being defended instead of being worked through to figure out these better ways and people saying, yes, this is a problem. It seems so abundantly clear that the violence is a problem. And, for instance, Howard Zinn's teachings, what came to the table to be taught in public school curriculum. And I recently heard Donald Trump say that those teachings should not be taught in public schools because those teachings are against the USA and it's against the goodness of the United States. But these are facts that Howard Zinn has uncovered really deep, comprehensive history about this country. And so to learn more about the history of this country to gain appreciation, I think is really important.
Thanks, Liz. And Ron, I'm going to ask you to bat cleanup again on this question.
Okay. Well, there was, I respect and admire all the previous opinions. And that's a fact. I think they were all very well thought out. You can tell this is a big deal to each person by what they've said. Now, I do believe that there is some degree of racism. I don't know if it's as extreme as everyone thinks or as everyone seems to feel. I can tell you that I'm very, very conscious. I have, again, as I said, I'm a landlord. I have a lot of very good tenants of all colors and creeds. I have Black, Hispanics, I have some Asian people, I have some white people, and they're I vet them carefully. I have good people. I can't say anything in particular. I don't think I behave in a racist manner. I think that the Black Lives Matter movement has value to it. But the part that just blows my mind with it is all the rioting and looting and destruction of cities. I personally don't believe it's Black Lives Matter people. I think it's someone else who travels with them and goes with them. But every good, valid point that is made by a peaceful protest is completely lost when violence, looting, tearing down statues, and all that kind of stuff. That just turns people away instead of holding up the cross of their cause and saying, listen, here it is. We're having this problem or we're having that problem. You need to pay attention. While that's going on, you have all these, Donald Trump calls them anarchists. I don't know if that's the right term, but these looters and throwing water bottles at police and bricks and things of that nature. How is that going to help any movement? I don't care if it's Black Lives Matter. I don't care if it's podiatrists for a better smelling feet in America. If you're going to do stuff like that, go looting and destroying and threatening people, that's not helping your movement. That's not helping it at all. In fact, it's turning people away from you.
I hear what you're saying, Ron. There is a contrary viewpoint, which is summed up in an old saying that violence is the language of the unheard. I think some people would say, yeah, we tried the peaceful thing for 50 years and not much changed. So now we're going to do something else to get your attention. How does that explanation strike you?
Well, it does not make it okay with me. It doesn't. If you want to have a march, have a march. Do things like some of the other movements. There was a 1 million man immigrant march up they call it the mall in DC, mm-hmm. and things of that nature. There's many things that can be done, and I don't think any movement justifies violence and destruction against anyone.
Okay, thanks very much, Ron. I want to move us on to zeroing in on what's going to happen next Tuesday and maybe for days after that. 47% of the respondents, all registered voters in a YouGov poll, said they disagree with the statement that this election is likely to be fair and honest. So what about you guys? Are you at all worried about what might happen with the counting of ballots on or after November 3rd? Do you think you're going to trust the result that's eventually declared? And Ron, I'm going to start with you this time because I've been making you break glass.
I was getting used to batting cleanup.
Go lead off this time.
Anyway, I don't have a whole lot of faith in delayed I'm very, very disappointed in the government of Pennsylvania, making it so that the ballots don't have to be counted for how long is it? A week after the election?
3 days.
Another part of that I'm very concerned about. When you do a mail-in ballot, you're supposed to sign the envelope on the outside. The people who are looking at them don't even have to check and see if the ballot is really from a registered voter. And I'm very, very concerned about that. I think that's an opportunity for fraud. Am I accusing anyone? Absolutely not. I just think that it's kind of making a mess. If the mail-in ballots, especially during the pandemic, as long as there's a way to verify who it comes from, that each person gets one vote, I don't have a problem with the mail-in ballots, but I do have a problem. They should make the deadline for mail-in ballots. This is what I'm trying to say. They should have it 5 days before the election so that they have enough time to count the mail-in ballots. That's the only thing that I would change. And I do think they need to verify the signatures. Now, certainly, Jenna, you're a teacher. You can tell right away if a kid's not signing his name on the paper. You see it right away. You get used to it. If you look at a signature, I'm not saying that they need to have handwriting experts counting ballots. But if you look at an example of someone's signature here and another example, you can see if it's most likely from the same person. And I think that's a real opportunity for bad things.
Okay. Since time is a little short, I'm not going to throw any questions back at you because I want to hear from all four of our panelists.
Sure.
Abraham, what's your thought? What's your level of trust about this election coming up?
Well, I went to the early voting thing, and I went to the early voting thing, and it was full of Biden people. They had Biden face masks on, so I left. And plus, we had to stand in line an hour to vote early. You go and listen. I figure you go right to the voting booth on the day you vote, of November. I think it's November 3rd. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, on the day you vote, and you go right in, vote, and leave. There wasn't no line or nothing like that. You know, for everybody wants the power. People want the power, and people do anything to get to benefit. So I just hope things go right. I don't know who's gonna win. And the United States is gonna survive anyway. But I don't know if they take down that wall that Trump built, and we are invaded by the whole world, and we got to give all these. I don't know if America's going to survive then.
Okay.
I don't know. Every country in the world want to invade the United States.
Okay, thank
you. I don't know.
And again, moving along, I'm just going to throw it to Liz and get your views on this.
All right. So is this going to be a fair and honest election? I think it's good to have mail-in voting in all the states because of the pandemic and open up the time frame for voting a little bit more. That was good. I already voted, and I heard from Northampton County by email that they received my ballot, and I really appreciated that. That seemed like a good closed system that is just, no hanging chads there. So I do feel there's going to be some problems with the election, with mail-in voting, fraud. I don't know how intentional it may or may not be, but just because of the nature of it being new in so many states, like Oregon's had mail-in voting all along, so they're used to it, but we're not so much. So, that might create problems. And then the timeline that Ron was talking about, like Wisconsin, I guess they just decided that the ballots need to be received by November 3rd at 8 p.m. And that's really tight, with everything that's going on the way it is, the intensity, the pandemic, mail-in voting. I personally feel like it should be election week. and that we need to allow for some extra time, knowing that there's going to be ballots being counted, starting November 3rd. We should open up that timeline a little bit more. So I don't think it's going to be totally accurate, no, but yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks very much. Jenna, you're batting cleanup this time.
I almost feel like I don't want to talk about this topic because it really came from a schoolyard bully mentality that we are even talking about questioning the results of an election. There's an election process in place for a reason. Whether I agree or don't agree with the Electoral College, we have a process that's been in place as part of our democracy for years. Ron, you brought up some really great points. The fact that ballots are sitting. I did sign the outside of my ballot, as every person who drops a ballot in the ballot box and is voting. I will tell you that the signature that I currently have in 2020 does not match my signature in the roll records for registration of voters, because that was 20 years ago. And that's really difficult. I do trust that my ballot will be counted accurately. It would be great if we could start counting ballots early. However, in the state of Pennsylvania, we tried to make that happen. However, that was blocked by the Republicans. So I think there's going to be questions after this election as to, reminiscent of the hanging chads. And we're going to have a real commitment to some patience through the process. And, the name calling and mudslinging really needs to kind of stop. The process needs to take place. And again, we need to remember our youngest Americans are listening to the conversation. They need to know that they can hear both sides of an issue, come to some compromise on some things. But what they're learning right now is that it has to be ugly. And that's an unfortunate byproduct of this election season.
Well, actually, Jenna, I'd like to underline that the four of you just actually described the fault lines of trust pretty well, but without it getting ugly. So I commend you for that. I'm going to move on to our last question, and don't put the slide up. Well, you've done it. Okay, you're all set. An organization called More in Common, and the name of the organization sort of gives away a little bit about where they're coming from. But they did a survey of American voters and discovered that Democrats and Republicans imagine that the other side is way more extreme than it really is. By almost 2-to-1 factor, they think the other side holds views that could be characterized as extreme. So, I think I've gotten a pretty clear sense that Ron leans Trump. Abraham is definitely Trump. I think, Jenna, I feel safe in assuming that you're definitely leaning Biden. Liz, I'm not sure about. And you can't or you don't have to tell us how you're planning to vote. But I just want to know how you feel about the people who are going to vote the other way this time. Do you see them as patriotic fellow Americans, or do you see them as flawed in some serious way? And I'm going to start with Liz this time.
That's an interesting question. I feel that people, I've already voted. I voted for Biden and Harris. I feel that people who are voting for Trump or abstaining from voting, let's see, they would vote more for, I think that Trump enamors people somehow. He has this following that is, he evokes strong emotions from people. And so he creates this following. There's that element to Trump supporters, I believe. And there's also the element of the economy. Well, I do believe that Biden could help us get to a progressive economy where we can embrace automation and jobs in automation and a cleaner, healthier environment with the economy. And that's all tied up together in it's woven and like a tapestry. It's cohesive. But Trump has this way of talking about the economy. He touts how he's going to do so great for the economy. I think the economy is, besides the pandemic, exactly the same as it was when Obama left office. But I think that people who vote for Trump are
more solely concerned with the economy and don't take some of the environmental issues or maybe social justice issues into account. Also the pro-life, which is a little interesting because that's like pro-life is different than medical freedom. It doesn't provide for medical freedom, but Trump does believe in freedom in choosing if we want to have vaccinations. So that medical freedom question is an interesting one.
Right. Thanks. Thanks, Liz. So, Ron, if I hadn't gotten a little scouting report on you before we got together tonight and just listened to what you said, I would be totally guessing as to which way you're going in this election. But let us know what you think about the other side.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I'm a Trump guy, but I'm not a brainwashed Trump guy like Liz was describing. There is value in what she says. What I see is I see an economy that was doing really, really well till the pandemic came along. I've also taken notice we haven't had a lot of terrorism going on. Haven't seen the attacks. There's been one or two, but it's not making the news right now. I think a part of that could be because of Donald Trump. I think those guys are genuinely scared. I think that's a good thing. But listen, I'm not here to say all the things that I think are great about Trump. Let me just make this comment on the switching sides idea.
Mhm.
I do like Trump. But I vote for whoever I think can handle the job. And everything that I've seen of Joe Biden, it just doesn't seem to me that he can do it. And that's the truth. Not because he's a bad guy. I think he's just getting old. And it's that simple. I think he's just getting old. He's forgetful. I've seen some absent-minded kind of stuff, and I'm concerned about that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I've always leaned hard towards conservative when it comes to the economy, and I'm very much pro-life. But I don't know how to really answer that completely. I'm definitely voting for Trump. I like his economic forecast. In fact, honestly, 2016 was the first time I ever voted in a presidential election, and that was for Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Many of us who were supporting Trump at that time had a talk amongst ourselves that, well, I think under Trump, the economy will do good if he doesn't start World War III. I was very impressed with the Middle East peace deal. If that continues, I was extremely happy to see the troops coming home from Iraq, Afghanistan, and some of those places. I was glad to see some of the steps from was it the Iranian nuclear deal, right? That's the one, right? Yes. I was glad to see.
Ron, can I just jump in? I want to get your opinion quickly on one more thing and then move on to Jenna and Abraham. When you look at people who are going to vote for Biden, or even people who voted for Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, do you see them as true patriotic Americans or people who are looking to destroy the country?
I do think Bernie was very, very extreme and quite radical with his viewpoints. But listen, this is a democracy, right, wrong, or otherwise. I don't agree with a lot of the Democratic proposals and the positions. But the bottom line is we all have to vote our heart. You have to vote for who you think is going to do the best job, whether it's a Democrat, a Republican, or a liberal. I was supporting, or not a liberal, an independent, I should say. I was supporting Ross Perot back in the day because I thought he would do a good job. And, you know, I don't think it says, I think if you put some real serious thought into who you're voting for and look at things that are important to you, I think your decision is very easy, and I don't think anyone should be criticized or thought badly of for that.
Okay, thank you very much, Ron. Abraham, which way you're leaning, and how would you describe people who are going to vote for the other guy?
I can understand. I can understand the point of view of people who vote for Joe Biden, because most of them want their relatives to come from them other countries to come into the United States. You know, I'm in Allentown. I see a lot of Joe Biden signs. You know what? But like, this is the United States. You got the right to vote any way you want to vote. You know, I don't have nothing against nobody who vote for who don't vote for Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump, he's doing a lot of things that I agree with. There ain't no wars nowhere. And if somebody tried to start a war in another country, Donald Trump wouldn't send no troops. He was sending somebody to take care of the leaders of that country. That's the kind of man he is. Donald Trump ain't sending no troops nowhere. He's sending in the supersonic military, understand, to take them out, or some drones or something, you know. Anyways, Trump is a good guy. He comes from New York like I came from, and I kind of understand the things he said, how he said it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's about it.
Okay, thanks very much. So far, if this little republic that we have here on this Zoom, we're all of America, it looks like we wouldn't have riots and violence in the street no matter who won. But Jenna, how are you feeling right now? And how are you feeling about people who are going to vote for Mr. Trump?
Well, I live with someone who will be voting for the opposing candidate that I am voting for. I live in a house divided, and I can have civil discourse with my husband on these topics. And I think there's a real opportunity for growth that exists from seeing the other side. And I say that because it's something I really do try to teach my students, that there are always different sides to an issue. And you really need to understand both before you really kind of formulate your own conclusions. You know, I could be part of the perpetuation of the mudslinging. I could very easily go down that road, and it's just not a place where I want to go, because that second I put my ballot in that ballot box at Bethlehem City Hall, I voted. And that was a pretty empowering position to put myself in, the fact that I had decided and I was going to check out of the last few weeks that are proving to be very dirty. But it's really important to stay true to who you are. I do listen to all the candidates. I do listen to their positions on things. There are times when I do vote cross-party because of position, and that's okay, because it's not about the party, it's about the candidate, and it's about the person who's most appropriate for the job. Now, Ron, I do want to point something out about what you had said before about Vice President Biden speaking publicly. I would just like to remind a large majority of our population that Joe Biden was a student who struggled with stuttering in his early age. And for someone who has a stuttering issue, to get up and speak publicly is a very large challenge. And I think we forget that in the end, we are all human. We have our flaws, and so do the candidates. But Joe Biden does work through a disability every time he gets up there to speak publicly.
Okay, and that is going to wrap up our conversation tonight. I want to thank Jenna, Abraham, Liz, and Ron. It has been a blast being with you, and you've been candid, you've been thoughtful, and I've really enjoyed our time together. We also want to thank all of you for joining us. We hope you found the dialogue interesting and maybe even encouraging. Again, let me urge you to take a look at Lehigh Valley Live Swing County Swing State Project. Again, the URL where you can find it is lehighvalleylive.com/Swing County. And thanks again to the John Farmer Memorial Journalism Fund for supporting this project and tonight's program. Thanks to Nicholas Falsoni, the managing editor at Lehigh Valley Live, who headed the project, and all the wonderful NJ Advanced Digital Media team who helped us pull this program together and ran the Zoom. If you'd like to know more about the work of my organization, the PA Project for Civic Engagement, you can find us at 70.org/tools/PPCE. That's 70, the number spelled out. It's the Committee of 70, the government group in Philadelphia is where we have our home. And finally, and you knew this was coming, please vote. The franchise is precious, but only if you use it. Don't leave it to others to pick your leaders for you. If you've got a mail-in ballot, mail it now, right now. The second you get up from your laptop or tablet, run out and put it in the nearest mailbox. You really, really need to get it in soon. Or you can drop it in one of the drop-off places that are still open and taking ballots in both Lehigh and Northampton County. But remember, in Pennsylvania, for your mail ballot to count, it needs to be postmarked no later than next Tuesday, November 3rd, if you're going to drop it in the mail. So do not procrastinate. If you got a mail-in ballot but now plan to vote at the polls for whatever reason, remember that next Tuesday you must bring every piece of that mail-in ballot package that you received with you to the polls. You're going to need to sign an affidavit discarding that mail-in ballot to be allowed to vote in person. And also stick with Lehigh Valley Live for coverage of Election Day and the results from one of the nation's key regions as America chooses its next leader and its next government. Again, thank you all for joining us, and thanks to Lehigh Valley Live for the great work they're doing around the election. And that wraps up tonight's program. Good night and have a good election.